Here we go.
All righty.
And we are live on Facebook. Welcome everyone to another New Jersey Constitutional Republicans virtual conversation. It's my great pleasure and privilege today to have Mr. Joe Gormley join us of Saving Fatherhood. Joe, thank you for joining me.
JR, couldn't be more excited to be partnering with you, not just to have a single episode, but to connect with you and your team of people who really care about New Jersey and care about New Jersey families, which is what Saving Fatherhood is all about.
That's right, Joe. And if you would introduce yourself to our audience, give us a brief bio, and then what your organization, Saving Fatherhood, is all about.
Sure, absolutely. My organization, Saving Fatherhood, got started in 2017. Started with a podcast and just have been trying to see what God would do with that. And he's really blessed me with a lot of opportunities to care for various people. I do a little bit of counseling. I call it defibrillator counseling, where I try and help people not get divorced. But the podcast, I've been blessed to interact with lots of people across the state and across the country, trying to do lots of different things. So if you go to the front page of our website, it has our mission statement. It says, Saving Fatherhood seeks to glorify God by serving victims of broken families. We help fathers and families apply biblical principles to family challenges, including, but not limited to, separation, divorce, parental alienation, and any situation either caused by, made worse by, or could be prevented by staying out of family court. And we do this through our podcast, private counseling, discipleship, and group studies for divorced and or alienated dads. And additionally, we're very involved in various political committees, including the FANPAC, which is the Family Advocate Network Political Action Committee. That's a New Jersey state committee. We're working on a couple of bills we could talk about. And additionally, we work with national groups too, because the family court is impacted by these different people. And we try and build relationships with different groups, churches, politicians, folks that can help us with our cause and our desire to help help families. That's about it.
And of course, there is we do have the website up for people to go to. It's www.savingfatherhood.org. And you're going to want to get familiar with this website. A lot of very important issues. We're very much aligned. From the beginning, Joe, we had produced a video called The Family Courts, and from our inception, and it's been seen, the video has been seen nationally. And as the constitutional Republicans, we believe the Republican Party needs to be engaged in social issues, that the Republican Party needs to take a high moral ground, not only with protecting the inviolability of the life of the child from conception, but also in preserving the conception of the joining together of the father and the mother, of the man and the woman, and protecting the sacrosanctness of marriage, in protecting the children that are anticipated in being brought into this world within the environment of marriage, the influence of the father, the influence of the mother, that important aspect, needing both. And we know, Joe, of course, of the statistics that clearly show the success attributed to every individual who has had the benefit of a mother and father present in the home.
Sure. Well, we've had a bill sitting in the State House for several years now that would prevent children from being weaponized in divorce court. And it was so well received when we pitched it to multiple state senators and assembly people. Not only would it easily pass if it was voted on, we had 30 legislators from the Assembly and the Senate that were signed on as co-sponsors. It's an incredibly powerful bill. It's a 50-50 shared parenting bill, which means that when you go into divorce court, you eliminate half of the fighting, because the fighting is all about money and custody. This eliminates the custody part, where you're putting the child in the middle of a battle that they didn't ask for, they don't deserve. And we want to pass that bill. That's our first priority. And we thought that was the slam dunk bill. We've got other goals in mind as well, but that one should have been a slam dunk. We're waiting for Mr. Sweeney to allow that bill to be voted on.
Yes, and of course, that's an issue in itself, that everything has to go through Mr. Sweeney. He rules the Senate with a dictatorial hand. And of course, he's the one who's deciding in lieu of the Democratic agenda. The Democrats, of course, are largely responsible for the changes that occurred with divorce law, primarily back in the 60s. That became very penal to the fathers, to the in court. And Joe, it's obvious, and you're well aware of this fact, but people need to be made to understand that what has happened in the divorce courts is a lack of due process. It's been a repudiation of the 14th Amendment.
Right.
Men have traditionally not, since the 1960s, since the rise of feminism and the rise of the free love movement and the rise of the far left, the what we call the post-progressive 1965 Democrats, they have waged war on the family, and they've specifically in New Jersey, it's been thrust upon the man. And the man has been denied due process and equal protection of the law. And this is really the impetus of the situation, is it not?
Well, I could sit here and shock people for a whole hour of things that they just can't believe go on in the family court. And it's not just the 14th Amendment. It's actually, here's my family court trivia question for you. Out of the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, which single amendment has the family court never violated? Because they've violated all but one. I'm sure you know this. This could be easy for you.
For family court.
Family court has violated the entire Bill of Rights with the exception of one amendment. Which amendment has the family court never violated?
Well, it's the Third Amendment.
Yes.
But the social,
You got it. I knew you'd get it.
But Joe, think about this. How about the social services that have gone into these homes and they actually try to evaluate what's going on?
You got to tell the people that are listening what the Third Amendment is first, because there's going to be some folks who don't know what the Third Amendment is. They've never quartered troops in anyone's house in New Jersey that I'm aware of. Now, I can't say that I know everything, but I know that they have violated the other 9 amendments of the Bill of Rights on a consistent basis.
Yes. But in the same aspect, we could think of those who are working for these social services as intruding on homes. I can see they clearly would break the privacy rights of many. Fourth Amendment. Fifth Amendment, of course, has very similar to the 14th Amendment. Sixth Amendment, they're definitely guilty of not giving speedy trials and not, there's really that's one of the issues I wanted to bring up with you. You usually have one man or one woman, a judge, making a decision, and there's no, there's no such thing as a jury, which may be in some of these cases, juries, and maybe in all cases, juries should be involved to protect the integrity of the family.
Without a doubt. And the problem that arises out of that is another whole hour that I could speak to. Basically, a jury is a good thing for a judge, right? That's a lot of pressure for one person to be making that decision, life-changing decisions. That's why, the Bill of Rights says that any civil action that is worth more than $20 should have a jury. And we have a right, but that's the problem. See, the founding fathers never envisioned a family court, right? A family court, they had these kinds of courts. They're called courts of equity back in England. And the whole purpose of the revolution, right, was to what? Get rid of all the evil things that Britain was doing, and including courts of equity, right? So
Yes.
courts of equity were not supposed to exist. A civil court should be the one that takes care of any family matters, because the family matters that they should be concerned with would be the execution of a contract or a covenant. However, we don't have contracts or covenants for marriage, which we should. What we have is a marriage license, which is not a contract between you and the person, or a covenant. It should be a covenant, but a contract if some people wanted that.
Yes.
It's not a contract or covenant between you and your spouse. What it is a unilateral agreement with the government and you. And that unilateral agreement means, when I say unilateral, they get to change it whenever they want. You don't. So, and you think that you're sitting out there pretty. Guess what? If you got married 10 years ago and they changed the law today, and then for some reason your spouse goes crazy and wants to divorce you, they're going to get to divorce you. You can't say no. And they're going to get to apply all the laws that have changed since you said I do. Laws that you would have never agreed to, things you would have, wait a minute, I'm not agreeing to that. But we don't really always know what we're signing, do we? Or what we're agreeing to.
Well, it's you're already making some great information available here as we're discussing the court, how the court reacts in lieu of divorce. And of course, we know that covenant is a spiritual covenant as well, which we'll get into. The fact that God has authorized marriage. He brought Adam and Eve together himself. He presided over the first marriage. He institutes marriage.
Amen.
He has defined what marriage clearly is, which is the union between a man and a woman.
Right.
And really the essential responsibility involved with that was to be fruitful and multiply, which has never been abrogated, because through that God brings about the people in this world whom he has upon whom he has decided and predestined to live, if you will. And we'll talk about some aspects of theology as we go through here.
Sure.
But the one thing that I think is interesting to note and unfortunate to note is the fact that in the 60s, it was the courts. And incidentally, if you do a Google search on family divorce in New Jersey, or anything related to New Jersey divorce laws, you're going to get opinions from one law firm after another. You're not going to get the opinion that a person like a Joe Gormley, who's advocating for the protection of families, because all of the attorneys are looking to make money off of divorce. And they've come up with this idea of no fault divorce, which I want to go into next, Joe. But the idea is what has happened is that the courts determined, and the social structure of thinking in the social services of the justices, of the lawyers at the time in the 60s, clearly favored the woman and thought that the woman is the essential participant that the child needs more than the man. And how dare that they take that, they make that assumption, because we know that exists, this exists. The family unit exists as a unit between the man and the woman. They both have their integral responsibilities, and both are necessary, not just one. In the courts in New Jersey have taken the side, well, the woman is the most essential, and that in itself is a fundamental fault with the divorce laws in New Jersey, correct?
Well, the feminists lied to women and said, you have no value if you're only a mother. If all you get out of life is being a mother, that is just too low a bar. We're not interested in promoting that. And so they promoted to so many women that you have to be a superwoman, that you have to have, well, actually, that's not true, because later on they said, well, we don't care if you're a mother at all. And you could just look at our birth rate. We're in big danger when, you want to talk about the problems that we have right now in medicine and hospitals. Wait till you have more people dying than are being born. And that's where they want to go. You talked about being fruitful and multiplying. They don't want that. And this is happening in other parts of the world. And we can see the devastation that it brings. So, but the feminists lied, and they said, you have to You have to have a career, and you have no value unless you have the same gifts God gave men. God gave men gifts and God gave women gifts, but they don't value the gifts that women have.
No.
And it's sad, and it is part of our post-Christian culture that's that isn't grateful for the gifts that they have. So yeah, you talked about no fault divorce coming to play. No fault divorce is, we really need a different term for no fault divorce. It's called, I call it unilateral divorce, right?
Mhm.
Because no fault divorce makes it sound nice. It's a nice thing. Like, it's like pro-choice, it's kind of,
Right.
pro-choice. Who isn't
Yeah.
pro-choice? We're all pro-choice, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
No fault divorce is unilateral divorce. It means that one person can violate the covenant that they made in front of a pastor or rabbi or whoever. They can violate that without the other person saying anything or having any say of the consequences that it's going to happen, because it rips up families, rips them up.
Yep.
And once you get into that court, nobody's even allowed to talk to each other. There's usually been a domestic violence or some other accusation. There's tons of false accusations, and lying's not only allowed, it's expected. So there's no such thing as perjury. It's horrific. I will talk anybody out of going to court. If you're thinking of going to court, here's the big mistake a lot of people make. They say, well, it'd be better for the kids for us not to be fighting in front of the kids. Let me tell you, it is not going to be better for the kids. Kids aren't getting married. Why? Because we've had unilateral divorce since early 70s in New Jersey. Yep.
Joe, I want to share with you. I've never publicly mentioned this, but one of the reasons that this issue is so dear to my heart is because I can empathize through experience of what happens in divorce, and the idea that, well, it's for the sake of the children that we have to get divorced because we argue, and they hear all this argument, and it's not right that you should hear this and that, which essentially is an excuse.
Sure.
Now, myself and my late older brother and my younger brother, I was 14 years old when my mother and father divorced. My father initiated it. At the time, they had built, at that time, a $1 million business here in South Jersey.
Wow.
And this is in the late 70s.
Yes.
And we grew up with, and I grew up until my early teens in a nuclear family. Of course, there was arguing going on, and there were unpleasantries here and there, but I still had the benefit of seeing my mother and father show love to one another, and brought us up on a very in a wonderful home. We got to play baseball, and we got to play Army, and we got to do all the things. We got to grow up on a golf course. I mean, we just had an extraordinary life. But then with the divorce came all of the ugliness. And this is why I empathize with children in divorces and how difficult it is for them because of the emotional stress. And I'm not saying this is an excuse, but I was so angry about what had happened with my parents that I couldn't focus on schoolwork. I didn't know what it was that I wanted to do. I grew up in the golf business. I wanted to be a golf professional. I knew all that, but I was angry at what happened, and it really tore me up. I mean, to the point where, I developed intestinal issues. And then my younger brother, of course, was very young, and he got, he was caught up in the middle of it. I'm caught up in the middle. My older brother went away to school at that time, at college, but we were asked to testify against our father. We were asked to testify against our mother. And it was just, and I'm at 14 years old doing this, and my brother's at 5 years old and doing this. So we know, we know how it works from experience, the terrible predicament a child is put in when the parents aren't able to work it out and get along and work out their marriage. And this is why I've always been involved since we created the Constitutional Republicans and getting the Republican Party to look at these family issues and to do all we can to as doing what you're doing, which is to prevent people from getting divorced to begin with.
Amen.
And then we'll talk about, before getting married, what's going on there. Why are people being given bad information about marriage?
Right. Well, people are,
and-
people assume, and I think a lot of religious people assume that, listen, if two people are equally yoked, you're not going to have a problem, right? Because if they respect the spiritual covenant, even though there's no legal protection, but that is a fool's game, especially in our culture where people are falling away from religion on a regular basis. We've got just after COVID, the churches just haven't come back the way that they were. People are sitting at home watching services, or just not really involved, or not engaged, or they're not reading their Bible. You can't count on the spiritual. You can't count on the spiritual goodness of either person, especially when they're young. They could change their minds on a lot of things. They could become an atheist at any time. We're in those kind of times. The reason we had back in ancient Israel, we had the whole town come out for the wedding because they were witnesses to the covenant. They were to hold each other accountable. We don't even know our neighbors anymore. How do we hold each other accountable, right? So we need to have a family court that's willing to hold the, and this is here's the great thing too. So you may not be aware of this. Most people are not aware of this. A lot of people who pay child support and spousal support are not aware of this, but the local courts are funded by Title 4D of the Social Security Administration. And what happens, this money comes from the federal government down to the local court. On average, 40 cents for every dollar that transfers from one spouse to another, 40 cents comes from the feds. So that's not coming out of the money that's being transferred. It's being matched through your local office of child support collections, which is usually just the local court's probation department. But it can go as high as $2 per. It can double. I mean, it's a ridiculous amount of money. It's very hard to track. Title 4E, you were talking about child protective services. Title 4E of the Social Security Administration funds child protective services, and they are a wicked and evil organization. Yes. And I run into a lot of people who love them because they think, oh, well, they're doing good work with adoptions and things like that. Well, wait a minute. We did adoptions forever in this country through nonprofits, through volunteers, but now we're kicking those people out because there's a new zeitgeist in town, a new spirit of the age that says we have a new morality. Hold on. And volunteerism is being kicked to the curb because everything's got to go through the government's hands. The government has to touch everything and get a cut on everything. And the family court, they get a big cut. It's a huge industry too. So the marriage industry is about $1 billion a year. 1B as in boy, billion. The divorce industry is a $50 billion a year industry. And you want to know why we can't get a bill passed that is going to cut down on half of the fighting? Because you cut down half of the fighting, you cut down on half of the attorney's fees.
So here we have it all driven by special interests. In this regard, the lawyers, the courts are motivated to push the divorces through. It's like a streamlined factory in that regard. They're getting money. They're getting subsidies federally. That should be cut off. The government, the founders would have intended that the government do everything it possibly can to support marriage and to provide. The founders would have hung the Supreme Court that didn't push back on FDR when he passed the darn thing. Absolutely. And then, of course, we saw it escalate to a whole different degree with LBJ in promoting single parent families.
Absolutely.
Welfare, the welfare system. It's had a decimating effect on our Black community with so many families not having a father there. And all of these policies driven by the New Deal and driven by the Great Society
Yeah.
have led to this
A couple of years ago, I
social,
interviewed a guy by the name of Rel Dowdell. He's a movie director in Philadelphia. He put out a movie called Where's Daddy? It was all about how child support has destroyed the Black community, and it was a really well done film. There was oh my gosh, the name escapes me right now. There was a bunch of famous Philadelphia people in it. It was a really great movie. I would highly suggest watching that, because people think that child support is this wonderful thing. Let me shock you a little bit with child support. People think why wouldn't I want, again, it has one of those names like, oh, why wouldn't I be pro-choice? Why wouldn't I be for child support? Of course I'm for supporting my child, but I want my child to come to my house periodically. I want to see my child. That's the problem. We don't get to see our children. There is tons of, if you don't pay your child support, debtor's prison is alive and well. Even though it's against the law, you will go to jail. The number of people in jail for child support is outrageous, and it happens all the time. Now, here's the thing. Child support's not based on what the child needs. It's not based on the child's, on how much the person paying the child support makes, which 15% of the time, by the way, is the woman. I can explain that. It's based on the potential of the non-custodial parent to pay. Primarily, the non-custodial parent is the person who makes more money to make sure that the two households that now have to be supported can be supported financially as best they can by the person making the most money. So if you make less money in the relationship, you get the kids. That's why now 15% of the time women are making more money than men now. And people who are in the quote unquote father's rights movement, which we're not, I can explain that. But people who are, they are very excited because women now are supporting men more and more, because like, whoa, wait a minute, we're losing the kids too. So yeah, it's child support it's another one of those wicked names where it sounds like such a great idea, but it's horrible. It's based on your potential earnings. So so I'm in sales, I'm in corporate sales. Mine was based on the best year I ever had in my life. So, is that helping my child any? No, not at all. You know, I mean, and I'm blessed. I'm not complaining. I mean, I at all. But I feel so bad for so many people that I know that end up in jail because one, the first thing you do when you go into divorce, this should make you not want to go into the divorce court at all. First, right off the bat, first thing you do is you fill out a case information statement. You basically put down your balance sheet and your income statement. They know every dime you've got in the bank. They know every dime you can make. And then they say, yep, that's about how much fight they got in them. And you're going to fight that much until you're completely drained. And then they'll be done with you. So have fun with that.
Yeah, it's terrible injustice. And we're just scratching the surface here. Of course, we're going to be talking about the bottom line, which is to stay out of the court system.
Yep.
And especially, work out your differences. And this is the first conversation that we're going to have, but we're going to really get into the foundation of this whole idea behind divorce. I will present the argument that the Bible clearly shows that there is to be no divorce, and the implications there. We'll go over some of the verses as we continue with our discussions. But in regards to the no-fault divorce, Joe, you see that the bar associations are going to line up in resolute determination to make sure that nothing changes from what's happening now. And your organization, the Constitutional Republican Movement, all Republicans should be looking to inject due process and equal protection of the law within this system that clearly does not adhere to the principle of equal application and protection of the law for all involved.
Yeah, well, I've got a question for you there. Why is it that the Republican Party allows for the Bar Association, which is clearly an arm of the Democratic Party, to control all
Mhm.
90 law schools in this country. And by doing so, dictate all legislation that comes out of there, or actually the lack of legislation, because we've punted the ball to the courts.
Well, of course, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party in some ways have become very, very symmetrical. And that one of the reasons we created this organization was to change that, was to get us back to the initial principles of the Republican Party. And of course, the Republican Party, Joe, is founded on the high moral concept, the high moral objective of eliminating the expansion of slavery and then eliminating slavery altogether. And we see that in certain respects, of course, very different than actual chattel slavery, but we see fathers, in some instances, mothers being enslaved to this family court system, enslaved to the, there you go, enslaved to how much money your child, how much money you have to pay for child services. And of course, the government has created this incentive for the bar associations, for the lawyers, for the courts, for the judges to continue on generating one divorce after another.
Yeah.
Whereas we know that the government should there to secure the rights of the people, which is male and female,
Right.
fathers and mothers. And the courts are working in juxtaposition to the idea of security of the person and their property, which includes their money.
Yeah.
And this is where the whole aspect of child support comes in. So this is a system that is fatally flawed. It's been flawed. And I'm going to make the argument, not today, we'll do it in a preceding program, but I'm going to make the argument, Joe, that a lot of these, the substantiation for divorce started in the churches. And that is indicative of the corruption and the apostasy within them.
Well,
And
I'll
why
sum
the
up my
people-
agreement with you right off the bat, because what happened with the church is a fractured church that couldn't stop arguing with each other for 5 minutes so that they could get together and say, you know what? God instituted 3 realms. He instituted a government, he instituted the
Yep.
family, and he instituted the church. And there are certain things that each one of those institutions are supposed to control, and they're not supposed to overlap. Our government is consuming roles that were defined by God for the church and for the family. And that is destroying our culture.
No question. And they're also creating new institutions like same-sex marriage, which is completely contradicts what Christ has clearly said in Matthew 19 throughout the scriptures. Men being created men, women being created women, the institution of marriage, those two becoming one. And then we have the Republican Party and some of the party acquiescing to this idea. Now,
Well,
people
because
can call marriage.
they've got no backup from Christians in their own party that these Christians think that there's some that separation of church and state actually exists in our founding documents, because they haven't even taken the half hour it takes to read the Constitution.
That's right, Joe. And the other thing is, and it's not even a matter of being a Jewish or Christian. It's also a matter of the laws of nature and nature's God, which is applicable to the general revelation, to the entire universe, if you will, and the people that exist on this earth. And that is that we know by nature, we knew by conscience, we know intuitively that marriage is made up of a man and a woman.
Right. Well,
And
freedom
you-
of religion.
Two people.
If you're an atheist, you need to lock on to that better than anybody, because there's no such thing outside the United States of you having a freedom of conscience or a freedom of religion, because that's what it is. It's like you just said very well. It's a freedom of conscience. You're not going to be allowed all these different things you want to worship. You'll worship one thing and one thing only. You'll worship the state.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Yeah.
that's what we see happening. That's what we see happening in New Jersey, the way Phil Murphy is taking dictatorial powers, exploiting this supposed health crisis to inflict all sorts of tyranny, and everything is coming down from the state. You know, the teachers now are required to teach LBGT agenda That comes from Phil Murphy. That's not coming from the local school board. That's not coming from the parents on the school board. That's why it's so important. We encourage parents to get on school boards, and that really the restoration of our republic, as I put out earlier this morning, depends upon those people who are sitting on the school board first.
Well, I think it comes from the United Nations. It comes from Agenda 21. It comes from the handlers of not just our governor, but our president, and some people around the world who stay behind the curtains. But it's a worldwide movement. And listen, we're going to end up just like Japan or China with more people dying than are being born, more elderly than are being born. There's not going to be enough doctors to take care of all the elderly people, because we're not going to be fruitful and multiply and replace ourselves. A society that can't replace themselves cannot hold on to its society.
We clearly see this demographically with all of the nations of Europe, with the Russians, with the Chinese now, who've begun to let up on the terminating of female life from infancy, from childhood, from birth. Now they're allowing more terrible institutions that would dictate population, saying who should live and who shouldn't. I mean, this is the ultimate evil. But you know something, Joe, there's precedent for this whole idea of a state, a universal state. And it all goes back to the Tower of Babel.
Amen.
It all goes back to one leader, a great leader at that time, whose name was Nimrod. But the objective was to build this tower, and basically with the fist in the air, and introduce. Interesting, that fist becomes a sign now of social justice and empowering humanity and man's pride, and we see the whole thing. History works in circles. It doesn't work linear. It works cyclical. So we see the whole idea. And what did God do to stop that Tower of Babel? He confused them with languages, and amazingly, to this very day, Joe, that what God did and what He implemented is working to this very day because of the obstructions that are put up in language. It's difficult for us to communicate with the Chinese, or it's difficult for the Chinese to talk to the Norwegians, and on and on and on it goes. And this was all part of God's great plan, and it's still indicative of controlling that nature to want to centralize power in one man or an oligarchy.
I'm so glad you brought up the pride thing, right? Because when I get I like to engage in debate a little bit. And when I talk sometimes I get accused of being a homophobe by someone who leads a homosexual lifestyle by their choice. And I say to them, I said, listen, I'd love to talk to you about sin, but the first one we got to worry about is pride, and they they got the pride march, and they want to be proud about their sexuality. Listen, pride's a wicked sin. It's the sin that got us kicked out of the garden, So let's start with that. Listen, the good news is there's a Savior. He wants to love you. He wants to care for you, and all these sins can be forgiven. So you just gotta accept the gift from the cross. But I have an olive branch I'd like to give to the homosexual community. I'd like to eliminate. So I think that bill I talked to you about, the 50-50 shared parenting bill. We had one of those passed in Tennessee, and it got manipulated by some sneaky people, and some little language got put in there that really watered down the final product. I think it's better just to erase laws that are wicked and evil rather than try to write new ones. And if we could eliminate marriage licenses, just completely eliminate them. If every person went out and saw a local lawyer, so we get some fees for the lawyers that are going to do good here. They're going to create a marriage contract or covenant, depending on your religious tradition. You make your own covenant. I'm even okay with saying, you know what, if you're going to have a marriage covenant, we got to define it as having this component, this component. We talk about children. We talk about income. We talk about what happens if the marriage is dissolved, if the contract or covenant is dissolved. Then when you go back to the judge in the civil court, right? Before you even get to a trial that requires a jury, you can just say, hey, look, it says this, this, and this. This is what we do. Everything's done ahead of time. But they don't even allow that. You know, in a prenup, you're not even allowed to put in a prenup what is going to happen to the kids. It's considered immoral. I don't know what moral book they're looking at, but it's certainly not my book of morality.
No.
They won't allow you in a prenup to just say what would happen to the children. That's like the most important thing. Instead, they're going to push into this family court that's going to destroy these kids. That's all it does, is it destroys kids. So here's what I think happens. And if Jack Chitterelli or anyone else wants to, more information on this, come talk to me at savingfatherhood.org, Joe G at savingfatherhood.org. And I'd love to help you design this, because all you got to do is get out your big eraser and erase. It might take an amendment to the state constitution outlawing marriage licenses, because they're first of all, they're a violation of my religious freedom. They are in complete violation of my religious freedom, because it just destroys every covenant I have at the altar. So anyway, if we did that, at the end of the day, look, you've got homosexual people or people want to design their own contract or covenant, they can do that. And I don't care what they do. Two people make an agreement that's separate from my church, that's separate from what I call marriage. It's their own definition. Let's see in 20 years what the statistics are on Christian marriage. Because today, I'm telling you, when you talk about statistics of Christian marriage, they have no idea of defining that.
Yeah, it's very true, Joe. And as you just said, that if two people choose to live a lifestyle, they're at liberty to do that as long as they're not infringing upon the natural rights of their fellow man. And that's not what we're objecting to. What we are doing is we are defending the traditional Christian, Judeo-Christian view of marriage,
right?
Which shows that God is the one who created this institution. It's a sacred institution. It's an institution that's been integral in the preservation of a civil society.
Right.
The parents are the first educators of the child. The parents are the ones who slap the child's behind in love, but in discipline, showing the child from the moment of birth right from wrong. And of course, we live in a highly relative oriented society, Joe, where truth now is being decided by basically that idea that beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, but now it's more like truth is in the eyes of the beholder. The influences of cultural relativity. But what we believe in as constitutional Republicans is that the laws of nature and nature's God need to be restored within public policy making. That means that we have to support what the general revelation, with this creation, with the universe, the laws of nature. Right. Whether it's the laws of whether it's the law of mathematics or the laws of economy or the laws of gravity or the laws of relativity, these are all sustained, and they sustain life. They sustain perpetual life. They need to be recognized again by the Republican Party. But
when the Supreme Court came out with their opinion on Obergefell, they recognized that what they had just done was to create a conflict between sexual freedom and religious freedom, and that they'd be back at it. So there's still things to work out. But again, I think the way to work this out is to get the government out of the business of marriage, get the government out of the business of families, get it out. And then every individual human being who's not breaking the law has a right under the Article 10 of the Constitution to go ahead and create a contract and or a covenant that is easily adjudicated just by reading it. How about that?
And yeah, true. And the other thing, Joe, that we have to remember, and I've talked about this prior, is that the 5th clause of the First Amendment talks about the right of redress, the government grievances. And I think that this is something that we could apply to your legislation in treating everyone equally within all the components of the family. I think this is something that if we could get enough people to sign on to, all we would need is one representative to bring it before the Assembly or the Senate and say, listen, this needs to be addressed. And they are required, according to the First Amendment, Of course, there's going to be a lot of lawyers out there that'll fight this, but the fact is that according to the First Amendment, the people have the right of redress, and this is, of course, the forgotten fifth clause. And incidentally, it was marginalized greatly due to John Quincy Adams' insistence on the abolishment of slavery in the 1830s. And it was called the gag rule, and it basically shut him up from continuing to talk about the redress. But we believe that the redress of grievances should be resurrected, especially in lieu of what the atrocities being committed upon people in family courts.
Well,
And,
very few people know that
you're-
there's even five freedoms in the First Amendment. And I'll be honest with you, until several years ago, until I had the boot of the government on the side of my head, I didn't bother to know those freedoms either. So listen, we've got to encourage people to get out there and read the freedoms. If there's one blessing going to come out of this COVID nightmare and this tyranny that we've experienced over the past 2 years, it's got to be that people start to realize that the government doesn't follow their own laws. And we need, if you're not going to hold them accountable to following their own laws, this is going to happen again. There, this COVID thing, I mean, it's still not gone. The tyranny's still not gone. They're going to push as hard as they can to see how far they can go the next time.
Yeah, no question. In fact, now the vaccines have become the issue, and mandating vaccines, which is, of course, it doesn't respect the right of autonomy, of the individual's autonomy, what they want to put in their arm or not. I'm one of those people that are defending those who have the right not to. And of course, I think there's been a tremendous abrogation of real science. I think there's been a bias placed upon the looking at this information. We have thousands of years of precedent, Joe, showing us that God created us with the ability to develop immunity. We've seen this throughout the course of history. This hasn't even been a thought. It's been shut the people up and then get a vaccine. Whereas opposed to herd mentality. And I saw an article that I thought was very interesting. It showed the attendance of one of the college football games, which was in the 50, 60,000 people. And there, right there, that picture right there was really the death of the most effective way in which to fight COVID, which we should have been doing all along, which was allowing our natural immunity overtake this virus. And people say, "Oh no, the government. You have to get a shot, and you have to stay in." And you talk about the hypocrisy of the government. And Phil Murphy, of course, calling all these businesses to shut down. And then we see him out having dinner with all of his family, and a woman gets upset with him. And one of his sons says, "Just stay home." And here they are out and having a dinner and so forth. So the hypocrisy of the ruling elite, which is what Phil Murphy and the Democrats represent, it's very similar to the slave power that began the Confederacy and tried to
come back and call us idiots. Say you're not trusting the science. Here's the problem with that: scientists. You can't listen to the science. You got to listen to individual scientists, and they all have bias, each and every one of them. When scientists disagree, it's not science, it's politics. If I go to 5 cardiologists, I'm going to get the same answer from all 5. If I go to 5 scientists, if they don't agree, there's no science to follow. And I know we're gonna probably run out of time. We're not going to be able to talk. We're gonna have to talk again. We're both. I enjoyed talking to you earlier about us both being Calvinists. I'm also a presuppositionalist when it comes to apologetics, and I will fight tooth and nail to anyone who tells me they can do science without a lawgiver. So, I don't know if you know that argument there. I'm sure you do.
Yeah, I do. And of course, that gets back to the laws of nature, and nature's God again, which the founders were smart enough to know that was what would entitle them to create this nation of ours. They can't be duplicated, and they can't be imported to another country. It is unique in time, space, and in humanity. And you're mentioning this. And the law, and we talk about just law, we'll talk about natural law, and we'll talk about just law. And we see that these decisions that are made in family courts are unjust laws, and they are not equitable. and they violate the constitutional rights, especially as we've seen in New Jersey of the men. It's been done deliberately. It's been done based on their science,
Yeah.
showing that the woman is better equipped. The woman should be the one with automatic custody rights. The woman needs this amount of much money, and all these different these ideas that really started to proliferate in the 60s.
It's worse
But,
than that. I mean, we had the whole Me Too movement. That's all over the family
Mhm.
court. You know, someone makes an accusation. Well, of course they wouldn't lie. Of course they wouldn't say, well, we take the kids away because she wouldn't tell an untruth, right? We'll be in court in a few
Right.
months. You'll get your kids back. 3 years later, 4 years later, kid doesn't even know who you are.
Yeah, exactly. And again, this is a lack of due process that, being before a peers, being before a jury, the idea with the whole court system, a person is assumed innocent until proven guilty. And these decisions are made a priori, before the case is even heard.
Yeah, well,
This is
the
terrible.
the criminal court is, is what you just said, assumed innocence, innocent until proven guilty. The civil court is based on a preponderance of the evidence. In family court, everybody's guilty. You are guilty of having a bad marriage and your spouse wants to leave. So we're going to divvy everything up and make sure that you don't become a ward of the state. That's what happens.
Mhm. Yes.
You
And that
give
in
up, you
itself is
basically give up your control over your life. And, I would be the first to argue if that prevented people from getting divorced, then I might be okay with that. But it doesn't prevent people from getting divorced and then you get divorced and your life gets ripped to shreds. Your children get ripped to shreds. Your parents never see their kids again. Parental alienation happens where the kid doesn't even know you. And if they do know you, they hate you. It's just evil. It's awful. And people, it happens so frequently, but we never hear about it because once people are done with it, they don't want to admit it. They're shamed. And this whole thing on the left, they want to, there's no such thing as shaming people anymore. Hello. Yeah, they're going to shame you. They'll shame you big time. So they don't talk about that. Nobody talks about it. So it's hard for us to even get people to get involved and speak out about the atrocities in the family court because people want to forget it. One of the blessings of bad memory, I guess. So,
well, this is why organizations like yourself, Saving Fatherhood, and also from the political party side, the constitutional Republicans, we're going to be working together to further educate the citizens on the injustices that occur in the family courts, the lack of due process that needs to be implemented. But also, and I'd like to have you back on in October. I'd like to have you come on at least once a month or once every 6 weeks to discuss these issues because there's a lot there. We just scratched the surface today, but I want to talk about with you next time, Joe, the impetus that exists, or that was the impetus that forged the environment from which people can think that they can get an easy divorce. And of course, this is this contradicts the laws of nature and nature's God, as I always talk about.
right.
And it may save people who are not yet married or contemplating married or will be married soon, a tremendous amount of angst and trouble in their lives if we can get this information to them that clearly shows the sanctity of marriage and the responsibility that the father and the mother, the husband and the wife have within that matrimonial relationship, and how that ties to Christ and his elect body, which is the true church.
We got to point people to Christ.
We'll
that's going to save marriage for sure.
That's right. And he clearly gives us the recipe for success and the recipe for destruction. And unfortunately, the family courts don't recognize the word of God as law, which it is. And we know, Joe, that any unjust law is no law at all. And there are many instances of law that's been legislated through our civil government. Civic government that are unjust. Roe v. Wade is just one of many. Obergefell could be considered another, but not nearly on the not nearly as dramatic or as consequential as Roe v. Wade.
Like you said, I'd be really, thank you for offering to have me back. I'd love to come back. We did just scratch the surface. There's so much involved. We didn't even talk about, how do judges CYA because they don't have a jury? Well, they use something called psychology and psychologists, forensic psychologists.
Yes.
So you need to be very worried and concerned about that. And I really think that if you are a Christian, you should be exempt again from the First Amendment from having to go under psychological scrutiny. I've had multiple psychologists as interview on my program, so I'm not throwing them all under the bus. Anybody who spends time caring for people that are in physical harm or emotional harm, that's a very noble thing. The problem is psychologists don't all agree with each other either, so it's really not a science. Okay, so and a lot of it is antithetical to Christian philosophy in the Bible. So that's a very dangerous thing. So I'd love to talk to you about that sometime. And can I plug a couple of things about my show?
Oh, absolutely. Please do. And
So
as you're doing that, Joe, I just want to add very quickly that, you're talking about these psychiatrists and psychologists. Well, they're all, their worldviews are based upon Darwin. They believe in evolution. They believe in accident. They believe that people are mere animals, that everything, there's no consequence, there's no sacrosanctness to anything. But we believe that all human beings are created in the image of God, and there in itself is a tremendous dichotomy there.
Yep.
Believe that human beings are created in the very image of the creator and lawgiver of the world, spoke the universe into being, and then those who believe that we're no more than a higher form of an ape. So there's a big difference there.
I can give you example after example. The one thing I talked about is one of the biggest problems in the family court is this thing called parental alienation. And the people that have done all the studying of parental alienation are all psychologists. So I'm listening to the one guy talk about his explanation for how it comes about and how he wants to treat it. And he starts out with, back when we were living in caves, it's just this whole presumptions of things they can't prove, the things that are, again, antithetical to what we believe.
Bad science.
Yeah, it's bad science. It's just bad science. So yeah, so one of the things I'm going to be doing on my podcast over the next several months is I'm going to be reading a book called Wise Counsel. It's a biblical counseling book. It's how we counsel people with psychological problems before the 1800s. We use the Bible, and the Bible has a lot to say about mental health and how to care for you during that. So I'm hoping to, also translate some of the psychologists that have done work on parental alienation. I want to translate their work and their research, because their research is very good, but I want to translate it into biblical language, things that are compatible with the things we believe. So, or that I believe as a Christian, and I think you should believe as a future Christian. That's every one of you.
Outstanding.
Yeah, but we have, we got a couple other events coming up. We missed, the one on the 23rd. The FANPAC, Family Advocate Network Political Action Committee. You should, if you're interested in this kind of thing, that's the political group that I work with to try and get legislation passed for these types of things. It's a phenomenal organization. We meet once a month on the first Friday of the month. So next Friday, and if you're interested in going, I'll put a link on my program. Maybe we get a link here where you can always email me at joeg@savingfatherhood.org. Love to have you attend a FANPAC meeting.
Joe G at Saving Father. Joe, we've had a relationship with Raphael and FANPAC over the years. We haven't touched base in a while, but we would like to be engaged again in FANPAC. We believe that there's worthy work being done. They've come down, they've spoken to us personally at our meeting. So I am familiar with FANPAC, and that would be good to be to get reoriented and to get working with that organization along with you.
Yeah, they're a great bunch of guys. I've also got, I do a divorced and or alienated dad's Bible study every other Wednesday night. That's available at 8 p.m. And there's a link on at savingfatherhood.org for that. And you sign up on Meetup. It's a virtual event. So we got people from all over there. And then also I'm going to be on a television show, a local Cherry Hill, New Jersey television show called New Perspectives on October 12th. And that'll be very interesting. But we'll keep you up to date, and hopefully I'll be back here again real soon because JR does great work. And I've just been a fan of his for a while, and I'm excited to be here and work together on change in New Jersey.
Absolutely. And Joe, it's been a great conversation. I'm so happy that this has been long overdue. And I just want to show the share screen. Here is the website you're going to want to go to, folks, savingfatherhood.org. And there also is a Facebook page, correct?
Yeah, there's
Joe,
a Facebook page
that.
and a Facebook group. The Facebook group is really great because people are more willing to talk about the issues that they've had in a private group than on public Facebook. So, you can check and make sure that your spouse is not on there, or ex-spouse, or family members, if you want to talk about these things, because you can't talk. By the way, you can't talk about anything on social media when you're going through the courts. You will be destroyed. It's a problem. It's a big problem. Freedom of speech just doesn't exist if you're about to ready to go through court.
Another deprivation of constitutional rights. They're just all over with the family court. It's amazing. It's saturated in unconstitutional.
Everything but the Third Amendment.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm gonna put that on the back of one of my T-shirts. Oh, let me show you one of my shirts. And actually, JR, if you would wear it, I will send you one of these. This is
please do. I would be honored to wear that.
You don't always wear a tie, because I always see you wearing a tie. I put a sport coat on here first time in a while.
Well, I do take the tie off when I engaged in multiple activities off camera, and I would be honored to display the shirt and promote the organization, which I'll be doing anyway, with or without the shirts. But I would love to have a shirt, and I'm excited about joining forces with you now. And we talk about justice all the time, very simply. What is justice? And what is justice is the work that you're engaged in helping fathers and helping the alienation that occurs through the injustices of the court system.
Yeah,
we want to require our representatives to have more of a say in changing the family court and bringing back due process to everyone equally, treating everyone indiscriminately, which obviously the family courts don't do. So I'm really excited about working with you in the future and having you come on every 4 to 6 weeks to give us an update. We're going to talk to the people about how this environment of easy divorces has come about. And up until the 1960s, Joe, was a very, very different world.
Yep.
And of course, the 1960s has changed everything.
Well, you pegged it. You blamed it on feminism. You are spot on. That is the zeitgeist, the spirit of the age that allowed for that stuff to happen. And they, Ronald Reagan signed the first bill in 1969 in California, because it all happened at the state level. He signed it in, and he was, he had gone through a divorce, and his divorce was horrible. He was devastated by it. He didn't want to be divorced. Right. So, and most men don't want to be divorced. 80% of the time, it's the woman that brings up the divorce, because the feminists are lying to them about what is going to make them happy. We got to be more concerned with truth. You got to be a truth seeker, not a happiness seeker. If you seek happiness and not truth, you'll get neither. If you seek truth, you'll get both. Right. Because God does want to bring you joy. So, Ronald Reagan, it was just horrible. He brought that into play because they told him that it was going to help women prevent them from having to bring up proof when they were getting beaten up by their spouses. And you know what? It's just a lie. It's just not statistically enough. We have created house beaters now. Now we have created those monsters.
Right. Yeah, there's no question. It's very ironic that Ronald Reagan did indeed sign that first no-fault law in California in 1969. And then, feminism obviously is an aspect, but also the free love movement, which basically said that you could have sexual relations outside of the environment of matrimony, which we know is a disaster and against the laws of nature, and nature's God again. So, and then coupling that with the teachings of the cultural Marxist of Herbert Marcuse, who became really the spearhead behind this idea of the far left. And of course, he used a lot of the sexual norms or the anti-sexual norms, the ones that would restrict eros and civilization. He's talking about the fact that you don't need to have marriage. Marriage does not need to be the only environment from which you can express yourself sexually. And I remember a book that even my parents had on the counter or near their bedstand. It was called The Joy of Sex, and I was appalled by it. I was only 8 years old at the time, but that book had an impetus, Joe, in creating the environment from which they would become divorced, because the idea was to experiment, and the idea was to experience sex outside of the matrimonial relationship and commit adultery, and how that was a good thing, and expressing yourself and all this, which has led to the moral deprivation and disintegration of our society.
Yep.
So we have a lot to talk about in future programs. And I think tonight we got off to a great start, don't you?
I do too. I could talk to you for another 3 or 4 hours, but I know we're not going to do that tonight. So, but we'll definitely come back and we'll get into it. You know, next time maybe we'll get into some scripture. We didn't get into one. I'll tell you what. I want to bring up 2 scriptures real quick. One, I want to put on the back of your shirt. I'm not going to send you this one because I always have something on the back of these shirts. One of them says, "Family courts steal children." This one says,
"Divorced dads matter."
Divorced dads matter. But the one I really love is I got a scripture on there, Genesis 50:20, and that's when Joseph is feeding his brothers who had tried to kill him and had tried to and thrown him into slavery, and then he ended up in jail for 15 long years, just suffering. But unjustly. It says, "What you meant for evil, God meant for good, for the saving of many lives," as is happening right now. And Joseph, the man who was beaten and imprisoned and enslaved, is there in Egypt feeding his family who had done all those wicked things to him. So we can forgive all sorts of sins because God, Jesus, and he gives us the power and the strength to do that with his Holy Spirit. And we can fight for justice. The other verse I want to share that I just love is, Jesus said, tithing mint and dill, great. That was things you should have done, but you should have been more concerned with the weightier matters of the law, justice and love and mercy. So justice, my friend, justice. That's what we got to fight for. That's what God, if you got to feed people, you can't, we talk about all the time. Like I say to the left, they say, well, you got to feed people. If you're not going to feed them, you're not going to care. You're not caring for them. You're not loving them the way Christ did. Yeah, you got to feed them. You also got to feed them justice. You got to care about, if your neighbor is being unjustly drugged through the family court, you can't just sit there. You got to do something about it. So that's what we got to do. We got to do something and honor God.
That's right, Joe. That's right. And Joe, what you were saying about feeding people reminds me of the verse that says that man cannot live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth from the mouth of God.
Amen.
And that, of course, is the Bible. And that's what we'll continue to talk about. Joe, it's been great to have you. Like you said, we could talk all night long, but we will look forward to joining me once again. In 4 to 6 weeks, we'll get back together and we'll flush out some more of these scriptural verses. And I really appreciate you coming on. And I want to end the show, Joe, with what I talk about, a very important quote that I believe that the Republican Party readopts this quote and makes this our mantra, if you will, the very words of Lincoln. He said this, quote, he said, "All this is not the result of an accident, but it has a philosophical cause. Without the Constitution, the Union, we could not have attained the result. But even these are not the primary cause of our great prosperity. There's something in back of these, entwining with more closely about the human heart. And that is something is the principle of liberty to all, the principle that clears the path for all and gives hope to all, and by consequence, enterprise and industry to all." And that, of course, is our mantra, Joe, of liberty to all. And that liberty would be applied to fathers, mothers, and children, all equally and indiscriminately within our civil society.
Amen, brother.
Listen, Joe, thanks so much. Please, our audience, like and share the video. This information needs to get out. It's very difficult to find information anywhere like you're going to hear from Joe and myself regarding this topic. And this is just one of the amongst many that we can address. And Joe summed it up beautifully. It's all about justice. We're interested in real justice, not so-called modified justice that we see being the words that are placed before the word justice. Justice is right and wrong. And that's what we're engaged in. That's what we're interested in having an effect on. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, sir.
And we'll see you again. Thank you, everyone, for joining me, and God bless and take care. Everybody have a good weekend and take care. God bless.